duck. This is a story about Duck, the Great Western Engine. When he came to the station, he soon made it clear he wasn't put up for any nonsense. But there was one engine, and who was more than a match for him. One morning, Percy was talking to Gordon and James in the engine shed. Sir Topham Hatt is getting bigger. A bigger engine. Sir Topham Hatt is getting a bigger engine to help me, said Percy proudly. Nonsense, said Gordon. We don't need a bigger engine. We just need to work more and or less, said James. Percy sighed. No one listens to me. They think I'm a silly little tank engine and order me about. I'll show them. But he didn't know how. Later that day, Percy brought some coaches to the station. Hello, Percy, said Sir Topham Hatt. You look tired. Yes, sir, replied Percy sadly. I don't know if I'm standing on my dome or on my wheels. Cheer up, Percy, laughed Sir Topham Hatt. The new engine can do the work alone. Can you help Thomas and Toby build my new harbor? Oh, thank you, sir, said Percy happily. The next morning, the new engine arrived. He was a Great Western engine. What's your name? Asked Sir Topham Hatt. Montague, sir, but everyone calls me Duck because they say I waddle, replied the engine. I don't really, sir, but I like being called Duck. Duck it is, then, said Sir Topham Hatt. Percy came and showed Duck around. Duck and Percy got on well. Duck knew how to make trucks behave, and soon they were almost finished. James, Gordon, and Henry watched Duck quietly do his work. We'll have some fun, and they whispered. They wheezed, quack, quack, quack. Percy was cross, but Duck ignored him. Then the big engines began to order him about. Do they tell you how to do things, Percy? Asked Duck. Yes, they do, replied Percy sadly. Right, said Duck. We'll soon put a stop to that nonsense. And he whispered something into Percy. We'll do it tonight. That evening, Sir Topham Hatt was just about to go home and for tea when he heard a terrible noise. He hurried to the yard. Henry, Gordon, and James were wheezing furiously. Stop that noise! Bellowed Sir Topham Hatt. They won't let us in, hissed Gordon. And Sir Topham had reasoned with Duck and Percy. Sir Topham had realized that Duck and Percy were set and calmly at the points outside the engine shed, refusing to move. Sir Topham Hatt was very angry. Duck, explain this behavior, he shouted. Beg pardon, sir, said Duck politely, but these engines are giving us orders. Please, can you affirm that we only take orders from you? Duck and Percy, you've caused a disturbance, thundered Sir Topham Hatt. And as for you, he said, turning to the big engines, you made the disturbance. Duck is quite right. This is my railway, and I give the orders. Henry, Gordon, and James was very embarrassed. From then on, Duck worked well in the yard, and Sir Topham Hatt was very pleased with him. One day, Duck was resting in the engine shed when Sir Topham Hatt arrived. "Would you like to have a branch line of your own?" he asked. "Yes, please, sir," said Duck excitedly, and he took charge of his own branch line, which ran along the coast to the small railway. Duck was very proud of his branch line, but he couldn't do all the work himself, so Donald and Douglas took turns to help him. One evening, he was talking to Donald. "You don't understand how much Sir Topham Hatt relies on me," said Duck proudly. "I'm Great Western, and I—" "Quack, quack, quack!" interrupted Donald. "You sound like you laid an egg. Now let an engine sleep." "Quack yourself," said Duck indignantly. The following morning, Duck spoke to his driver. "Donald says I quack as if I laid an egg," he said. "Let's play a joke on him to teach him a lesson." "I have an idea," laughed the fireman. And he whispered to Duck and his driver that night, when Donald was asleep, Duck's driver and fireman put something in Donald's water tank. The next morning, when Donald stopped for water, he found he had an unexpected passenger aboard. A yellow duckling popped out of his water tank. His driver and fireman could hardly believe their eyes, but Donald smiled. "I know who's behind this," he laughed, and Donald told them what had happened in the shed. The duckling was tame. She shared the driver and fireman's sandwiches and rode in the tender. But as the days went on, she grew tired of traveling and hopped off at a station, where she stayed. Before they reached home, Donald and his driver and fireman made a plan. That night, they were busy. When Duck's crew arrived in the morning, they made a surprise discovery. "Look, Duck," they laughed. "There's a nest with an egg in it under your bunker." Donald opened a sleepy eye. Well, he exclaimed. "You must have laid it in the night." Duck laughed. "You win, Donald. It would take a clever engine to get the better of you." Duck and Donald became good friends, and the duckling settled the station. She lived in a pond nearby, but she always flew back to the station to welcome the engines. Donald was her favorite, and she sometimes hopped on for a ride, but the station master calls her Dilly. But to everyone else, she is always Donald's duck.